Middle Podcast, the podcast dedicated to the music, movies, and culture of Generation X.
What is up, slackers, and welcome to another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. I am your host, Jason Eck, and I just have to get this out of the way right at the beginning of the episode. I had just one of those days at work where, and I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure that you've all experienced this. There's sometimes just one or two people sometime that for whatever reason can say, even if it's the right thing at the wrong time and it just completely deflates you. That was my day today. Feeling completely, absolutely defeated, deflated, what have you. And I was having a really hard time getting up and ready to record the podcast. And you know, I really enjoy the podcast. I love doing it. And, it seems that I start to break through from listenership and all that. Then days like these, it just seems so exhausting. But I guess the real reason is I would much rather be doing this on a daily basis than my job, frankly. So please, if any of y'all are actually really enjoying this show, please show me a little love. As I say always at the end of the episode, subscribing and sharing and interacting. And I mean this sincerely. And I really would like to hear your feedback on episodes. Now, a couple of people do that, and I really appreciate that. Really, truly appreciate that. But really, the way to grow anything, you have to grow it kind of as a community. So if you're saying to yourself, yeah, but on social media, you don't really post much other than the actual, kind of summary, and I'll do like some kind of multimedia thing on Instagram, Facebook, etc. But I'm really only posting like once a week. If you would be more apt to engage if I were more frequently doing things on social media, then that gives me a little bit of fire and motivation to do that. So truly, please contact me with what you'd like to see. Head over to that poll that I mentioned that's over on Facebook, because right now I have that one topic, and I'm trying to get a hold of a person who is involved with it to get them on the show. It's probably pie in the sky for me to get this person, but I'm going to do my best. And that brings me to the fact that next week is going to be the 52nd episode of the show. Now, technically, today's episode should be episode 52. However, I did miss 1 week with COVID. So we are coming up to the 1 year anniversary of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. And I just had an episode become my most downloaded episode by a fair margin versus some of the other ones. And I'm going to post something about that too, because I think, surprised to see which episode has made it to the top of my list. And I'm hoping to get some interaction from some people that, again, way out of my league. Don't get me wrong, way out of my league. But you have to try. You have to try. So I have some major guests in mind that I am really trying to get done. Like, I really would like to see it happen, but it's probably not going to happen soon. But I still have to try. And if anyone has any tips or tricks about utilizing social media in order to get, attention of people that you might be interested in without just being ridiculously self-serving and being a complete shill for myself and begging even, please come on my podcast. Any advice, I am open. I'm open to hear. Any podcasting advice, marketing advice, social media advice. I'm all about it because I've reached that point now where I think I can go as far as I can go, which is I've hit this kind of plateau again. It was starting to kind of go in the other direction where it was starting to go up again. And now I've reached that other plateau, and I'm always looking for ways to break through. But long-winded way of saying that I almost just said screw it and didn't do the episode. I wasn't going to get it out on time, but I've committed to this. And for those of you who come back week after week, I so appreciate that you do so. So here I am. I'm recording. I just have to compartmentalize in the back of my mind that some people just in general sometimes make it more difficult for us than we'd like. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. And given that I am ridiculously hard on myself, when I get outside criticism, I take it even harder. Just a facet of my personality. So what are we going to talk about this week? Well, my daughter came down. She came down the stairs the other day, and I was thinking, as I was looking at her, the things that she was wearing, and also some things that I found lying around the house. And it struck me, and I've known this consciously for a while now, but actually articulating it and saying, fashion from the 90s is back in style. Now, that makes me feel even older because it's enough where I remember being in the 90s, like when the 90s were actually happening, and there were some elements of the 60s and then the 70s. Like you're watching as each decade builds on the next and builds on the next of what is considered retro, what comes back in and out of style. And here's the bottom line. We didn't have great fashion, we say, looking in hindsight, because we see pictures of ourselves and we go, really? Oh boy, what were we thinking? And I certainly have more than my fair share of that, because I've mentioned on the podcast before, one of my, I guess it's a positive trait. It's a positive trait, I think. Some may disagree, but I've always believed somewhat in the concept of reinvention, you know, and that particularly with the kind of business that I do now, there's a certain annual flow to things. And I've always just had these different, lack of a better term, different looks and different styles. Glasses are such a huge thing, because I look back on some of the glasses that I had. I got glasses for the first time at, that was 10 years old, I believe. And my eyes have just simply gotten worse and worse as each year has gone on. But the glasses were the big, thick plastic. Those kind of started to come back a little bit. And certainly like things like aviator shades. Well, I'm jumping all over the place, but the reality is my daughter is wearing things that are clearly very 80s and 90s, more 90s. Like the color denim that she's wearing and the high waists, and, pretty soon they're going to be pegging pants. But what they're doing now is they're putting the socks over the pants. That might as well be leg warmers the way that it looks. It is very clearly cool to be from the 90s again. So I kind of went back and said, well, as someone who was born in the 70s and remembers enough of the 70s, I thought about the fact that somewhere along the line, somewhere in the 70s, it was determined that it was normal for guys to wear half shirts. Half shirts. Go back and watch Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You'll see some in there and other stuff from that time period. And I remember clearly being a little kid and wearing half shirts. And usually it would be like with a number on it, number 15. It didn't mean anything. It was just a number. So almost a pseudo like sports thing. But I remember having like a yellow half shirt that had some kind of like Hawaiian design on it. Of course, if that's not enough, you are coupling that with a pair of like stripe on the side athletic shorts like the athletic shorts, the windbreaker-like material. But no, that's not enough. So a half shirt, short shorts, and high striped socks, high striped crew socks coming up over the calf. Okay. And then a pair of sneakers, whatever they are. Man, that is a hell of a look, and thankfully I can take no credit for it because I was a kid and being dressed. Oh, it's summertime, half shirt, little shorts, going out, have a good time. And that was just common and normal. So as I'm going along, I think about the different, years in school. So I remember a point where, so I mentioned the big, thick plastic glasses, right? So when I got the glasses, but I like to set it off with a really cool look. Whereas I had feathered hair and a rat tail. Do you remember rat tails being a thing? Oh yeah. I had a long rat tail in the back. So the rest of the hair, relatively short, kind of feathered in the front, and this rat tail. And I'm not even going to get into one of the stories, but I just remember, Eddie. Somebody go ahead and hit me up from back home. Eddie Torres. I think it was Eddie Torres. He drove an Alfa Romeo when we were in high school. I just remember that because nobody had a car like that. Why did he have this Alfa Romeo? He had to have an Alfa Romeo. And, but I remember one day I was walking home from school and he stopped me and he started talking to me. And, he had mentioned some things about my look at the time, that I'll always remember. I'll just keep that between the two of us. But yeah, rat tails were a thing. So big, thick plastic glasses and a rat tail. So then this guy becomes super popular by the name of Michael Jackson. So with Michael Jackson being a big thing, he had an influence on fashion as well. So being a kid of modest means, growing up in a single mom household, all that, I was sometimes getting to things a little later than perhaps some of my peers. So I remember I got these pair of red, not really vinyl, but the Michael Jackson outfit from Thriller, right? And it had all the zippers, right? So I had a vest with all the zippers. I had a stupid glove, right? A little sequence glove. I didn't have white. I had blue or green. Blue? Did I have green or blue? Anyway, sequence glove because that was hella cool. And I had these pants that had buttons going up the side, not buttons, snaps. They had snaps going up and up each side of them. And the most hideous thing. Now, the thing is, anything that may have been fashionable, I would need to have as actual clothes. So even the next year in middle school, which is a very sensitive age, particularly my 7th grade year, not a fine point in my life. And I was still wearing those pants, which were now entirely passé. It's 86. That would have been, so fall of 86 was my 7th grade year, I think, right? 86, 87, and 87. Yeah. And, I got made fun of a little bit for having these pants because they were so 1985 or whatever. And admittedly, they were ugly. They were really ugly. But that was the cool thing at the time. Well, a year prior. Because now, I think it was it 6th or 7th grade, there became another phenomenon, which at the time, when you look back on it, was relatively expensive. Now, I can only imagine what those same fashions would cost in, 2023, just extrapolating inflation and all those kind of things. But there were a number of things that were incredibly popular. So one was Ocean Pacific. Everyone had to have an OP shirt. That was the thing. And that was kind of a crossover appeal between like the kids who were like actual skaters and like the kids who were really terrible skaters like me, basically borderline poser. I wasn't good. But OP was a huge thing. And then there was Varney. I don't even remember what Varney was. Is that French? What is that? A big V on your chest for the clothes. And was there a thing that was J. Cavarici? Was that middle school too, or was that older? I don't know, but that was like a big deal. And then randomly, Coca-Cola rugby shirts. Now, I don't know where that came from or how it started, but having a Coca-Cola shirt was a big freaking deal. Now, admittedly, they were rather heavy, those rugbys. So heavy quality, good stuff. So it was like Coca-Cola and I think Benetton was making these shirts. So those were like the two main brands. But I mean, talk about a triple whammy of branding, if you think about it, because Coke had gone through the rebranding, New Coke and all that, but now they have a clothing line. And what they also did, which was very clever, was they capitalized on another major trend that was happening at the time, which was the Swatch watch. So Coca-Cola was also producing Coke watches. Now, oddly enough, from a price point perspective, I was able to more easily come by a Coca-Cola watch before I ever had a Swatch watch. And I think in part because anything that we were going to spend money on in my household had to serve some greater, I guess, necessity, right? It had to serve a purpose, and having a watch was a actual, beneficial thing to have, much more so than having a brand name rugby shirt. Now, I did eventually get a Coca-Cola shirt, and thankfully I didn't get like a Pepsi shirt, because I'm pretty sure that right towards the tail end, Pepsi was like, we got to get in on this act. Really, the coolest thing would be a Dr. Pepper shirt. I'd wear one of those now, frankly. But then the swatches, people would have them lining their arms. And I'm like, who are you that you can afford to have like 3 or 4 watches on each arm? And you had to have your Swatch watch protector that went over it, which is basically like a freaking rubber band that covered it and kept it from getting scratched, which is yes, completely reasonable to be a protective case. We think about it all with our phones. You got to have a case. Same thing, but such a simple and relatively unattractive design when the watches themselves were all meant to be almost little pieces of art. So the Swatch watch was a big deal. So around this time, so 7th grade is the time. So I told you I had the rat tail, but then I started to actually grow out my hair, because now I've moved out of the Michael Jackson realm for the most part into rock and roll, Guns N' Roses and Poison and all that, right? And with that, growing out my hair, I began the early phases of what would become basically my fashion calling card for the late 80s through the 90s, which was a mullet. Also around this time, there was a mainstream kind of resurgence of superheroes. And what's curious is how that is mirroring what's happening currently. And for me, I've said it before, and I will do an episode at some point about my experience growing up as a DC Comics fan, which has been kind of disappointing when you look at what has occurred with Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe being major blockbuster after major blockbuster and telling a long form, cohesive story across different franchises. And that's a really fascinating approach. But currently what you have is James Gunn and Rob Safran, who have taken over the entire DC Cinematic Universe. And they're doing what they call a kind of a soft reset with the upcoming Flash movie. Now, any of you who have seen the trailer for this will know that the big reveal is the return of Michael Keaton as Batman. Now, fast forward back in time, fast reverse reverse into time. The first Batman with Michael Keaton, many people were saying that there's no way this is going to work. He's Mr. Mom, right? Like, this isn't going to work. And Tim Burton was like, no, this is the guy. And plus you have Jack Nicholson, the Joker. So there was a resurgence in the bat symbol, and Batman t-shirts became a little bit of a fashion statement at that time as well. Certainly in between my 8th grade year and my freshman year. Now, I'm not going to throw a certain person under the bus, but I had a bit of a falling out with someone who was one of my closest friends in between there. And there was a whole Batman t-shirt incident that we won't get into. So getting into freshman year, one of the big things for me was, so my mom and my stepdad were engaged and ready to be married. And what was happening is we had found a house. It was being built for my uncle at the time, uncle by marriage. They got divorced subsequent to that, but he was my uncle, and he was in construction, and he found this parcel up in a part of Meriden, up on a hill by this place called Beaver's Pond, and kind of an out of the way, like out of the city, kind of the other side of town from really where all my friends were. And we moved into this house during my freshman year, during my first few months. And the reason that that's so critical is part of what was happening was basically certain things that I would need to do to earn things in the house. Like, so the big thing was that at one point we were going to potentially move to Rhode Island. And I will admit, I was a little punk. I was a little snot, okay? Because I didn't get much out of life, but what I had, I really wanted to keep, particularly because by the end of 8th grade, I'd established some really solid friendships, which was not something that was always easy for me. It's like, what the hell does that have to do with fashion and all that? Well, hear me out. So it kind of went back and forth with my mom, my stepdad, and, you know, they're trying to be gracious, trying to be understanding, which honestly, major credit. Like, you know, there's a lot of things that we disagreed with over the years, but, you know, I'm so appreciative of the decision that we were going to stay in Meriden. But the trade-off was we were going to move out into the middle of nowhere, you know, other side of town from really where everyone was. And my neighborhood at the time, depending on where you were, literally you could be one street over. You'd go to one high school. You're right. I had a bus stop. Literally a young lady was on the other side of the street from me. Right. So I would walk down to the bus stop because they didn't come and pick you up like right at your driveway like they do now. Like get stuck behind a bus now in a suburban area. You're stopping like every 30 feet. Ridiculous. Honestly, I know the world's a crazy place. It's a dangerous place. There are serial killers and wackos and psychos out there, but you could have like a shared bus stop. Come on. And if any of you are in areas where this doesn't happen, good for you. You're in a good place. Because here it's ridiculous. They literally come and pick you up in front of your house. And then your neighbor's house and your neighbor's house and no one. So anyway, this girl, which I never really got to talk to, she was like across the street. So I would wait on one side of the street for my bus and she would wait for the other, because even though I literally came right down the hill and around the corner, we went to different high schools. She went to Platt. I went to Maloney. So we were in this weird part of town. But anyway, the big trade-off was there was a couple of things that were going to happen for me that were really exciting. One of them was I was going to get a waterbed. I know no one has waterbeds anymore. People probably shouldn't have waterbeds, particularly like your back and just so many things that probably are not good about it. I know that they were kind of marketed as being like a healthier form of sleep. I'm not sure if that's true, but as a teenager, I slept heavy and it didn't matter. I found it comfortable. They have heaters in them. Very, very cool. Right. So I was going to get a waterbed, what they call a super single. Right. So I had this cool bed with like a built-in bookcase headboard. Now you have to imagine I was not used to having a normal, basically like nuclear family existence. So having like being able to get stuff like this was huge, like huge. Like I've said it before, I love my stepdad to death. Like so good to me. Like he's like my dad, period. And the other thing was contact lenses. Contact lenses was a huge thing. So basically I was going to get braces on, and the trade-off was, so I wasn't going to high school with glasses and braces, is that the braces went on, the glasses came off, and I got the contact lenses. Now, mind you, I did get, again, this, as my daughter would say, that's so bougie. I had the ceramic, so that way you couldn't even see them as much. You just had the metal wire in between. But that in of itself is such, I don't know, that's such a 90s thing, the ceramic brace. Well, actually, this was 88. This was 88, and I was getting these ceramic braces, and like that was like, okay, here's the trade-off, and I get contact lenses. So I got a mullet, got a Batman t-shirt on, and, you know, you're wearing basically acid wash jeans, and there were kind of two primary things you would wear on your feet. The first one is timeless. Timeless. My kids wear them. Chucks. Some good old Converse All-Stars. I had one. I had pairs in so many different colors. Mint green, blue. Gosh, what colors did I have? I had a few pairs. I also like to kind of set them off with safety pins. I don't know, punk rock, man, like safety pins all over them. I think that was a thing for a while. And the other one, because you had to peg your pants too, right? So anyone who doesn't know what pegging your pants is, not pegging what you do. I know what you just thought about. That is not what I mean. Pegging your pants was basically rolling them. You rolled them. You created like a cuff at the bottom. And you would top that off with Eastlands. Now, I thought Eastland as a brand was defunct, but that's not true. You can still get Eastland shoes. It's still a brand. It's out there. So you not only would get your Eastland, so either as a loafer or like a chukka, right? Chukka is kind of like a, low boot. And you couldn't just tie them. No. You had to make this stupid little, I don't know what you'd call it. You'd make like a little cylinder at the end of the lace because you didn't actually tie them, right? You just made this weird little loop thing, and that's how you wore your shoes. That was the trend. Pegged pants, mullet, ridiculous. So the fashion of the time was just brutal when you think about it. But what happened with that is like in the summer, I don't remember wearing shorts a lot in high school. Like if I went swimming, sure, but I feel like I just wore jeans like all the time. No, because I did wear some like baggy, like ridiculous, like it wasn't like it was in the 90s, and we'll get to that in a minute, but it was definitely like a sweatpants style for a little bit. The Simpsons t-shirts were like a big deal, and like the Bart Simpson eat my shorts. What a weird thing. Now, if the guys had it bad, the girls had it equally bad because, these high waists and these big belts and this massive hair. Banana clips. Do you know those are back? That's another thing that my daughter has. She has the clips, right? I think my wife's rocking a clip, but I mean, that's something that she'd be used to, right? So you got your banana clips, and they would wear like jackets with big, huge shoulder pads. Like that was a real thing. Like for any of you who might be like on the younger side who didn't think that this was real, it was real. It was real. And the colors would be gaudy. I have this amazing picture. I'll have to get permission to post it. I'll put it on social media. So my girlfriend in high school and I did a photo shoot, right? Just like portrait studio. And she was wearing a all mustard colored outfit. So a mustard, like long blazer, almost like a dress length with like a skirt length and like a big yellow belt and mustard yellow leggings. It looked like a pantsuit except with leggings and like these tall boots, like these tall knee-high boots. And I was wearing a purple cable knit sweater with a pair of purple khakis pegged with Eastlands and my sweet mullet. Oh, it is amazing. It is amazing that even exists. Truly. Wow. Just looking back on it. Band t-shirts have always been a thing. You know, you would go to the concert and you'd come back and you'd had to have a t-shirt. And then I believe, was it when I was 15 or 16, I was able to get, if I got honor roll, I could get my ear pierced. So I went to this place in Middletown, Connecticut and got my ear pierced. And of course, I ended up wearing a dangling cross because what's more heavy metal than that? Yeah, long dangly earrings, for a little while. And this goes back to the 70s as well. So my mom, her family last name is Italian. Okay. And even though when I did my 23andMe, I forget if it's 7% or 11%, like a small percentage Italian. And anyone who's watched any of the video versions of the podcast, which I will get back to eventually, like I'm recording this with video as we speak. I just haven't posted it. It was the Italian horns, right? You wear the Italian gold. Like there's this picture of me from, I want to say like 81. I'm wearing what looks to be a silk shirt. Okay. I'm like, no, maybe it's like 84. I'm probably like 10, right? A silk shirt with way too many buttons open, like no chest hair. Cause I'm like 10, like straight out of like The Godfather or no, I shouldn't even say Godfather. It's more like Scarface or Saturday Night Fever. Silk shirt opened up, the Italian horn around my neck. It's absurd. Absolutely absurd. That's another terrible, tragic fashion trend was all of those like pseudo silk. They're polyester shirts. Awful materials. Just gross. So, what am I missing for the girls? Yeah, the hair was rough, guys and girls, honestly. The only ones who like bucked any kind of trends were always the swimmers. They always shaved their heads. They'd always shave things into their heads. Yeah. And just like the band shirts, I mean, that was basically my standard uniform. I would alternate kind of my style by day. One day it would be like kind of more preppy, like the cable knit, whatever. Next day was total rocker. So depending on the outfit would depend on the shoes. So whether it was the Converse or whether it was the Eastlands. So then as I get into the latter part of high school, I do something that is considered unfathomable. And I remember a friend of mine stopped me in the door when this happened. But so guys who are out there, you may have remembered doing something stupid for a girl. Okay. And there's this girl and she was a friend of a friend and it's like a whole complicated thing. And she'd said something about the long hair or whatever, right? Now I am thinking I got a shot here. Like it's going to happen, right? Like I was very assured that this would be a done deal kind of thing. So I cut my hair short. Now I showed up at school and there's this kid, Mike, who stops me in the hallway and he's staring at me. And he does a full walk around me because he needs to see the back of my head and if the hair is there. And there was this kid we went to high school, Andy, whose hair was never quite as long as mine, but it was still longish. And he goes, first Andy, and now you. I don't know what the world is coming to. And he like throws up his hands in disgust and walks away. Because apparently there were some last vestiges of high school. This was our senior year. And it's like, it was almost this reminder that we were in a different place in our lives and we were going to be heading out into the world and things were changing. Now, as soon as the thing didn't happen with the girl, I started growing my hair back. Like right away, started growing my hair back. Started with the bangs, because at the time, you know, Johnny Depp and like Richard Grieco, like that was the style, right? So a lot of bangs, you know, big bangs parted in the middle. And then I gradually started to, you know, grow my hair again. So I think by the time we were out of high school, by like a year, I was, you know, back to like shoulder length hair, all one length, set off with things like headbands, and I had my own scrunchies, and started buying my own ridiculous, gross, ugly polyester shirts and like bell bottoms and like just absurd, you know? So there was this kind of resurgence of like that 60s hippie style. So like I said, I had these bell bottoms that I bought at this secondhand shop up on the Berlin Turnpike in Meriden, where they had just basically a room with jeans, you know, used jeans. And I found these bell bottoms. Now at the time, I'm like a 30 waist. I'm like 130 pounds, rail thin, with long hair. And I wore those when I went to go see, Lenny Kravitz and, Blind Melon, both bands rocking a very retro style, right? So if anyone's listening to this going, well, I didn't really think the guys put any thought into style, more than you'd think. Now, some guys might be like, I don't know, I just want a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. Dude, all the power to you. That's how I am today. Like sometimes what I took off and next to my bed when I'm like exhausted, go right back on the next day on the weekends. I mean, obviously for work, I wear, you know, clean, fresh clothes every day, but on the weekend, it's just like a pair of jeans and a hoodie, and I might wear the same thing all weekend, and I'm okay with that. But at the time, you know, it's a time of wooing and courtship, the mating rituals of how we looked, how we smelled. Ah, how we smelled. I'm not going to lie. I wore cologne. Cologne was a thing. But again, I was kind of, you know, cheap-ish, you know, money wasn't growing on trees. So I did go through a Brut phase. Yeah. I wore Brut. And then, someone had gifted me some Pierre Cardin. I don't know what it was. And I think somewhere down I think I had, it was either what was it? It wasn't the Drakkar Noir. I forget exactly what it was. I feel like it was in like a blue, is it a bottle of cologne? I guess so. Yeah, I guess it's a cologne. It's a bottle. But I definitely had a cologne phase. That was like a whole thing. Like, why? I guess you got to smell good, right? So again, mating rituals. You want to make sure that you have the right scent to match your natural pheromones, because of that is going to get you the ladies. So you got to have the right hair, the right clothes, and the right scent. That being said, if I walk down a fragrance aisle at a store, I feel so sick. Just like, oh, too much. I do remember dating this one young lady who wore what can only be described as kind of an old lady fragrance. I think it's called Red, but for whatever reason, like with her natural scent and that red, top notch, smelled amazing. But I think that was a grandma kind of perfume, wasn't it? Red? I don't know. And I remember Giorgio Armani, was that being like a big thing? So yeah, just thinking about all these different things. There was, this phase right around the time of the show In Living Color, where these like patchwork, like super bright colors. So this was early 90s. And I remember having the brightest green jean jacket. Ugly awful. But that was part of like the hip hop style, because some days I would wake up and I would feel a little hip hop, right? Ugliest thing that you've ever seen. Because there was this place up on the Berlin Turnpike called Mickey Finn's that had kind of all the cool shit that you were supposed to get like before school started, kind of thing. And even into my first very unsuccessful foray into community college, you went and you bought clothes, whatever it was. And that was the best place to get sneakers. Sneakers. Okay. So I may have told this story before, but sneakers became a huge thing with Michael Jordan, right? So when those first pair of Jordans came out, this was a shift in sneakers being the height of fashion. Now, this is before Jordan had all these other, clothing items that went along with the brand. It was getting those first pair of Jordans, which, by the way, they do reissues of those to this day, and they're still getting like $200 for them, brand new. Same exact style that came out in 1980, whatever. Same thing, big money. And the fact that there's this huge secondary market for used shoes, used out of the box, like not brand spanking new. People will refurbish sneakers to resell them. Some people are finding them brand new, still in the box, never been worn, and they're paying a premium for them and then selling them in their own resale shops. Like, this is a huge thing. But for me, money being an issue, I would get an option for one pair of sneakers at the beginning of the year. So I remember for a little while, my dad would be responsible for sneakers, right? Up until such time as sneakers started to get too expensive. So one of the things that I really wanted was right around the time where the Jordans were a big thing, Reebok were a big thing. And you had these Reebok high tops, which had Velcro at the top. Those have also been reissued, and they're kind of dope, and I kind of want a pair. But the problem is, the trials and tribulations of a poor kid, single parents. I really wanted the black pair of Reeboks. I didn't want the white. I wanted the black. However, they were all sold out of the black, but man, I wanted to have those frickin' sneakers. So I got the only thing in my size that was available was that same model of sneaker in navy blue. Man, I was so desperate to have those brand name sneakers that I got the navy blue. Now, you have to understand the reason that I was so desperate to have them is because the sneakers that I had been wearing were literally falling apart because my mom was like, I am not buying you any sneakers more than $30. It has to be $30 or less. Maybe your father wants to buy you something, or you can go ahead and you can earn the money. But look, either we're going to Walmart and you're getting the crappiest shoes that are there, but they're $20, or you're not getting anything from me. So, oh my God. Okay, fine. I literally duct taped my leather Pumas that I already had. Like, that's all I wore, right? I just wore those. Literally wore holes in them and just had them duct taped because I walked to school. Ridiculous. So it's nothing like, screaming poverty chic. That's what that was. Poverty chic, without a doubt. But I needed to replace them. So I got the blue Reeboks, which of course I was never quite as satisfied as I would have been had I gotten the black Reeboks. Black Reeboks were supreme. And of course, another thing. So some things, it's so interesting what continues. I guess certain things are timeless. So the Chuck Taylors are timeless. Like, that was the basketball shoe of the NBA in the 50s? Not a lot of support of those suckers. But Vans have basically always been a thing since late 70s? I still have Vans. I'm wearing a Vans sweatshirt. The most comfortable shoe. However, the part of the reason they're comfortable is that now when you go and you buy a pair of Vans, And as a person of middle age, the fact that they have ortholite within them is screaming to my demographic. It's saying, no, you don't need the basic skate shoe. What you need is the orthotic Vans, because you need the support on your old ass feet. But Vans, also something that have remained in fashion all this time. Certain things are bulletproof. They say that you should always have one black, one blue, and one gray suit. And that is all you need. I currently have one suit because I wanted to get away from the suit thing and just wearing, the sports coat with a pair of slacks thing. So it's a little bit more casual than wearing the suit every day. But honestly, I would recommend, and I should probably do this for myself again at some point, one black, one blue, one gray suit, and you can just go ahead and cycle out different shirts, and you have one pair of black shoes, one pair of brown shoes, and a reversible black and brown belt, and you have everything that you possibly need. Really, truly everything. So anyway, that's my little walk down fashion memory lane. Now, I didn't get into some of the other trends, that existed. Actually, you know what? Before I sign off, I do have to go to the 90s for a minute. I got to go to the 90s for a minute. Well, actually, for the 80s too. Okay. One other thing from the 80s that I forgot about. Bike shorts. Bike shorts. Those are spandex. They're not flattering on anyone. Why the hell you would want a male to be wearing bike shorts? I don't know. Leaves nothing to the imagination. Maybe that was part of the reason, is like, hey, here we go. Ugly. If you are not actually a cyclist, do not wear bike pants. I'm talking to the guys primarily, because the bike pants are not so far away from like the yoga pants that are ubiquitous among women nowadays. And like leggings are now pants. Used to be that leggings were leggings. They weren't pants. They went under things, but now leggings are pants. It is what it is. Times change, fashion change. But although I will concede that I did in the early 90s wear baggy pants, I never went full Janko. I never went full Janko. I never went full Juggalo. I didn't do any of that. Okay. I wore baggy, loose fit pants. I was working at Urban Outfitters in Boston on Newbury Street, and get a discount and get all these clothes. A lot of ringer tees. One of my favorite of all time was actually, was that my friend's and I borrowed it? I think so. There's a Bob Barker shirt. That was pretty sweet. But I mean, it would just be all these ringer tees with like ridiculous designs on the front. I have a Bob Ross t-shirt somewhere. Love that. It says Happy Little Trees. Bob Ross is also timeless, by the way. Defies all odds and reason. But man, Happy Little Trees. I'm going to go a little green ochre. Yeah, little azure blue. Guy's a legend. But anyway, during that time, the pants got ridiculous. So some of my coworkers, with Urban Outfitters, it ran the gamut of having some more preppy types, particularly like the managers who were coming from retail. It's always like someone go, I was working over at Banana Republic and I decided to come over here. There's this guy who he had a Southern accent. I'm not doing it well, but he's like, hi, I'm Andy. I'll always remember Andy. I think the statute is long gone, but if anyone, was ever wondering how that hole got in the wall over by the door, headed out to the back, that was me. I had a bad moment. Shit happens. But, it was Fila shoes, baggy pants, the ringer tees, which I would sometimes top off with a dog collar, which matched my spiked bracelets. And at this time, I was heavily pierced, had my tattoos, and sometimes would have different color hair or a mohawk. I liked the mohawk and dog collar look with the baggy jeans because it was kind of like a mix of styles. But what are some of your maybe fashion faux pas, and not really faux pas. It's just a matter of that was the time. That was the time. And even if you weren't necessarily, like I said earlier, interested or even thought about the fact that you were wearing something from a fashion perspective, simply because of the time in which you were living, these things would happen naturally. They really would. So maybe you didn't really care about, what jeans you were wearing or what shirt you were wearing, but you had to have like the Eastlands, for example, or you had to have the Jordans, whatever it was. I think everyone had elements of this. And certainly if you were brand conscious, Gap became a huge thing. So did Banana Republic, J. Crew, Benetton. Like the mall I mentioned was a huge gathering place for everyone. So all of those brands had saturation amongst young people, in part because of the mall, which would then get magnified by, your big department stores that would also carry those brands, much less their individual, standalone stores. But yeah, Calvin Klein became a huge thing. Tommy Hilfiger, like all those things really came to the forefront in just my recollection, more so in the 90s. Like that's really when I think traction really hit, where you were going from runway designers to mainstream major brands that kids were hoping to have. So I talked about, my daughter coming down and wearing a pair of jeans straight out of, 91. My kids are surprisingly less brand conscious than you would expect, only with certain things like outerwear, like coats, a big deal. My daughter, a little bit with Lululemon, because that's like a big thing. But for the most part, other than the sneakers, the boys are like, oh, give me a t-shirt and a pair of pants, like joggers. Like that's like their whole thing. Like sneakers will always, I think, be a big deal. It's just part of it now. Part of it is comfort. Part of it is look. So there's a practicality to a good pair of sneakers. And then for their schools, they have to wear things like boat shoes. So it's just very, very common. I should get them Eastlands, make them peg their pants for school because they wear khakis and polos to school because they're uniform kids. So what were some of the things that you really enjoyed? Did you have big, huge hair, or are you before that? Are you one of those, if you were born in the 60s, you definitely had feathered hair, I bet. And did you wear like the shells, like the shell necklace? Like that was a thing. Did you wear half shirts, little tiny shorts where you're riding your 10-speed? The 10-speed, like everyone had the 10-speed. It didn't have mountain bikes. It's like you had a banana seat, or you had a BMX, or you had a 10-speed. And that was it. Yeah. What did you do? What did you have? Did you ever dye your hair, shave your head, have a mohawk? Let me know. So either in the comments or, as I always say, you can shoot me an email at stuckinthemiddlepod@yahoo.com. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at StuckPodX. You can head over to the Facebook page, Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. The poll is still up. Please go out there, cast your vote. But again, you can comment or you can share right on Facebook. Would love to go ahead and have that grow, because right now I do have over 500 followers on the Facebook page. I just need to have some engagement from that 500 and certainly get them over here to listen to the podcast. And as always, please like, subscribe, comment, give 5-star reviews. And most importantly, you have to subscribe to the podcast. So until next time, later, slackers.